Chatter number 3. A little bit of hiccup getting the the stream started there, but we're here. If you're joining me live, let me know that you're there, and stick your name and where you are and what the weather's like where you are currently into the live chat box, so I can see where you are. Even if you're watching the recording, it'd be interesting to see where you're watching this from. So just below the video, if you can leave your where you are, what the weather's like. Be interesting to see. I'm in Sydney, of course, and this morning, for a change, the sun is out, and I know a lot of people in Sydney will be glad to know that the sun is out, because it's been pretty rotten in Sydney for the last couple of weeks, and I think they're forecasting for the next few weeks that the weather is going to be pretty ordinary for a while. All right, well, let's get straight into Pixel Chatter for this week. And just so you know, there's not going to be a Pixel Chatter next week because I'm away in Tasmania with my camera, so I'm really looking forward to that. I've been to Tassie a couple of times, and Tassie is a real mecca for photographers, a nice photography playground. So I will be, I'll be heading back down to Tassie to take some photos and hopefully grab some great vlogs as well whilst I'm down there. All right, some people popping in now. G'day to Derek from dark and cold southeast England. Well, it's bright and sunny here today, but it hasn't been. And Sydney, typically, if we get wet weather, it's usually only for a couple of days, but we've had some pretty terrible weather for the last couple of days, unfortunately, or for the last couple of weeks, and I reckon it's going to be another week we're going to have the rain. G'day R7 Orkana in North Ireland. Andrew from Portsmouth, England. How's the boss? The boss is good. The boss is doing well. Hey, Brian, how you doing? 666 Daveker, g'day from Northern Ireland. A lot of people from Ireland. I'm from over that part of the world, so there you go. I know you're probably, with this red hair and fair skin, find it hard to believe that I was actually the first in my family to be born in Australia, or my family's from England, so I have a lot of English blood in me. A lot of people think I'm Irish, but I'm not. And maybe that's because of the red hair. I don't know why the Irish get dubbed without the red hair and the fair skin. G'day, Brian. Overcast in Geelong. Reuven says, happy to see the sun out at last in Sydney. Yeah, me too, buddy. It's been way too wet for way too long, and it doesn't help with the photography either, does it? Because we can't get out and take photos whilst it's that wet. All right. So let's get stuck straight into things. First of all, I wanted to quickly just remind people, I'm loving the connections that we have on Facebook and on Instagram. If you are on one of those platforms, join me over there, because I'm trying to post a photo up there every day. At the moment, I'm doing pretty well at that, and I've got hundreds and hundreds of photos in my on my hard drive, and I'll keep sharing those and really enjoying doing that. So on Instagram, same on Facebook. So if you are connected with me over there, great. I know some of you are, because I recognise the names that are coming up in the chat box as well, from what I see coming up on the images as I share them. Today. In fact, the people that I'm critiquing for today, and thank you, by the way, for sending all these images in. I've got so many now that Pixel Chatter will be able to go on and on and on. So hopefully you enjoy this show, because it's going to be going on for a long time. All right, so I've got 3 images I'm going to be critiquing today. I've got one from Becky B in Brisbane. Thank you. Also known as Rebecca, but goes by the name of Becky B. Petar from Sydney, I think he is. Well, I've got a photo of his from Sydney. And Grant from Scotland. So, 3 images there to do. I also want to let you know about something. One of the things that I was really sort of well known for, and if you go back and you have a look at my history, a lot of my photos, by the way, are processed with a methodology called HDR. And people, the jury's out on HDR, whether it's a good thing or not. And I'd be interested to hear your feedback. We think about HDR. G'day, Aussie Vlogs. So that's Paul from up in the Northern Territory, Outback Northern Territory. 40 degrees today. And that's Celsius, by the way, everyone that's tuning in for Aussie Vlogs up in the Northern Territory. Yeah, so a lot of my photos are done in HDR, and I wanted to quickly show you where I think it's applicable. And I probably, in the beginning, like anything, when I learned HDR, I probably did way too many photos in HDR and in times when it wasn't needed. But in the early days of digital photography, my cameras didn't have the dynamic range the Nikon D810 has. So I used HDR to sort of enable me to be able to take images of things with a high dynamic range and turn them into something much more spectacular, in my view. And so I just wanted to show you what HDR can do, because I think that if you use it in a way that's sparingly. Now, some people might say this one's overdone because it's a little bit vibrant, but it's not overdone compared to some of the HDR that's out there. But as you can see, I took a photo. I was in this old shed in Loftus, Sydney, which unfortunately some vandals have now burnt down and we can't go there anymore. But it was a great place. They stored old trains and buses in there, and it was quite dark. And as you can see, the dynamic range is quite extreme, from the light coming in through these windows on the right hand side to the darkness on the floor inside and the ceiling. By using HDR, which is taking multiple exposures and blending them together, you get something that looks like this. And to me, it's a much more exciting image. There's a lot more detail, and I really enjoy doing the whole HDR thing. Now, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but for me, I found it was a fun way to process my images, and I could get pretty stunning results quickly. Now, this is one example of a sort of a grungy look, because it is, it's inside an old bus. There's a lot of graffiti and a lot of mess. But here's another example of where HDR can work really well. Now, this is on a trip when I was in the South Island of New Zealand. And this particular jetty, I posted this picture up earlier on in the week, and a lot of people were asking me, it got a lot of attention, this image, but a lot of people were asking me how I process the image. And, once again, this particular town, there's a mountain behind it. So when the sun is coming up or going down, there's a lot of shadows, and it's surrounded by all these mountains. It's down in like a lake. And so I used HDR to process this one, and this is sort of how it come up with the HDR image. Now, once again, if it's done sparingly, you don't really notice that it's HDR, but it allows you to bring out all the colours and the detail in the image. And if you go to my website, on3legs.com, I've actually got a free tutorial on there on how to do HDR. And up until now, I've been recommending people get a product called Photomatics, which is the software that sort of blends it all together. But now there's so many different ways that you can blend the photos together. You don't actually need to buy any software if you don't want to. You can use Lightroom and you can use Photoshop to do the blending inside your computer. But the other thing you can do is there are other software programs now that are out there. Now, the guy that I learnt from, who you're probably all very familiar with, is a fellow called Trey Ratcliffe. And Trey Ratcliffe is known for his HDR. And once again, some people either love it or they hate it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Chuck it in the chat box. If you can see the chat box, what do you think about HDR? I'd love to get your feedback. But a lot of people don't like it, but it's something that I really enjoyed doing, and it enabled me to bring out the details and colours and images that otherwise I wouldn't be able to do. If you look at that image that I was showing you before, if I just quickly go back there, this image here, it's impossible to use a graduated filter because of the fact that there's that light pole on the top of the building. It's very difficult to use a graduated filter in the circumstances. So for me, the easiest way was to use HDR. So I bought a course from a fellow called Trey Ratcliffe. If you don't know who he is, I suggest you go and find him. It's Trey Ratcliffe. He now lives in the South Island of New Zealand. American guy I think he's from Texas. But amazing artist and photographer. I think some of the stuff that he's done was really inspiring for me, and was what got me heavily involved back into photography, because I'd sort of gone star for a while. I know you probably all go through the same thing, but he got me back involved in photography in a big way, because I started to really fall in love with HDR. And they asked See if we can make this work. Here we go. Still getting this technology working with these live streams. Anyway, so this is sort of the software. And the thing I love about what Trey's done is he's made it very much like Lightroom. So if you have a look on the right-hand side, you'll see it's very much like Lightroom. All the controls are very familiar. And I think that Photomatics was a bit complex. This is much simpler. Now, this is one of his images. This is not one of my images. And this is, 3 of exposures put together. And straight off the bat, you can see that the results are pretty good. You can actually reduce the HDR look if you want to, so you don't go so extreme. But I thought it was pretty cool. And what they did was they've got a promo on for the next month. So just a bit of a disclaimer here. I have become an affiliate for Aurora. And so what that means is that if you were to use the link that's below this video and buy it, I will get a commission. But you don't pay any more, and you're helping out my channel. And I wouldn't recommend something I haven't used myself. Now, if you look at those last 2 images that I showed you, let me just close that down now. Let's get rid of that. If you look at those 2 images that I just showed you, both of those I used Aurora HDR to process. So this one here and the bus, both of those I used Aurora HDR, and I got a much cleaner result than I did than using Photomatics. So I've used the product myself. There's a link down in the description. Now, the good news is you don't have to buy it if you don't want to buy it. There's a free trial. I just suggest you, before you even commit to anything, go and do that. But what they're doing, if you click on the link, they're and just so you know, if you click on the link and you do decide to buy it, I do get a commission, but you won't pay any extra. I just think it's a great deal, and if you do like HDR like I do, then it's a good opportunity for you not just to get the software, but also to buy the entire course from Trey Ratcliffe and get his get his tuition, because what he does is, I say realistic HDR. A lot of people may disagree. But I think what he does is pretty realistic, and it's a good way to learn. The other thing he does is he helps you overcome some of the common issues in HDR that a lot of people struggle with. Now, someone's telling me they're losing the feed. Let me just have a look and see what's going on. All right. Hopefully we're back. We're live, I think. Please let me know in the comments if you've got the feedback. That'd be good. All right. I believe we do. Let me just check my stream health again. Yeah, it's saying everything's good. Green light. And you're all sort of logging back in to come back. All right. That was a bit weird. But sometimes... yes, it's back. All right, cool. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. This is just technology, isn't it? That's what's going to happen in technology. Okay. So let's jump straight into Pixel Chatter. Let's go to this image. All right. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at 3 images, and the first image is from Becky B in Brisbane. And what's good is I've now got people sending in their images with their EXIF data. One of the images today, I don't have the EXIF data, but I can sort of share with you how it was shot. But they're also sharing with me how it's shot, so I can give you a little bit of a better critique. So if you are going to submit your images, I just suggest if you could submit at the same time the EXIF, make sure the EXIF data is in the image, or at least submit the EXIF data with the image. That way I can give you a bit more valuable feedback, and it actually makes a big difference. So this image here, Becky B shot, it's in Brisbane, I believe. Might not have been shot in Brisbane, but that's where Becky B is from. It's a sunrise photo. It was taken at 5:22 a.m. in March of last year. with a Canon 5D Mark III. And Becky has used her 24 to 105mm Canon lens and has shot it at a couple of things that I want to talk about that she shot it at that I think she could have done better. Now, before I do get into the nitty-gritty of the EXIF data and the details, let's just have a quick look at the image and what works well and what doesn't work well and what we could have fixed easily. So the first thing I'm going to do, which you're all getting used to by now, is I'm going to create a new layer and then grab the brush, and then we can start drawing some pictures. So straight away, there are some things about this that I don't like. These are probably boats anchored offshore somewhere that are going to come back in at some point and connect up to this big pipeline thing. Those little dots on the horizon are actually a distraction, and I don't think that they're it's great. I think we could do without those. The other thing I'm going to say about this is it's not a very interesting light, and that's not your fault, Becky. It's just the reality of that morning is there's no sunrise, and so when that happens, you've really got to get creative and start thinking about a different way to capture the scene that's going to that's going to make it more interesting. I'm just watching the question box at the same time. Yes, Aurora is only for Crapple. Sorry, Brian. Yes, it is only an Apple product. Aussie Vlog says, sorry, guys and girls, I'm very new to digital. What is EXIF data? Well, EXIF data is data that is saved inside an image that tells us how it was shot. Okay, so we can have a look and see what settings we used to capture this image. So this image here, as I said before, I can see what lens, what camera, what time, what ISO, how many seconds. So I'll get into that in a second. All right, so this image here, these three dots on the horizon, I don't think add any value. I think from a leading line point of view, this is good. Okay, so to have the leading line coming in, and whether it's from the top corner or the bottom corner doesn't matter. If it was me, I probably would have moved forward a little bit, so and been down low. Now the reason for that, and I'll do a new layer so we can see how I would have changed this composition up. The reason for that, if you have a look here, you can start to see there's some nice reflections happening in the wet sand. And I'm going to give you this tip. Whenever you see water on concrete or sand or anything like that, I think that you should get down low and take advantage of these reflections, because it doesn't happen very often, right? So it gives you the ability to capture that mirror image. And so I would have probably zoomed in a bit, knowing this is a 24 to 105mm lens. You might not have been able to get closer because the waves could have been coming right up here, but you could have at least zoomed in a little bit and tighten the crop up, something like that, because let's face it, there's nothing up here or here that adds value to this image. So it would have been quite simple to zoom in more and have a different looking image. Now let's just crop it so you can see what I'm talking about, because sometimes the value is actually doing something like the crop. So let's grab the crop tool, and then I'm going to crop it in a way that maybe I would have taken the photo with a zoom in. Let's go to there, something like that. Okay, now straight away you can see from that crop that the image has become more interesting. And so you've got to be really careful with your composition. I always say to people, if you find there's nothing interesting in the sky, let's put a new layer on. So if there's nothing interesting in the sky, don't put too much of it in your shot, because it's just boring, right? And what's happened here, as you can see, it's actually, this is just a small JPEG, but you can see that it's a lot of artifacts in the sky. You can see a bit of vignetting even after I've cropped it. So you've got to be really careful getting too much in the sky. And I think that to really, be careful with your composition, because that way you can make sure that you're not filling it up just for the sake of filling it up. You've had a zoom lens, you could have zoomed in, and I think it looks much more interesting. The other thing to think about, and this is once again using the crop tool, I can bring the grid, let's get the rule of thirds on there, is to think about where is the placement of everything in the image. And I know I keep saying this every week, just about every image I've critiqued so far, I would say composition could have been improved. And if you have a look here, the rule of thirds at play here, you've got this jetty or whatever it is ending right in the middle of the image there, past these two intersections. The horizon now, after my crop, is sort of on the bottom line, so it's using those two intersections, and you're getting more interest in the image by cropping it in a better way. So I always say, if you're going to take the time to get up early and take a photo, then take some time to think about your crop before you take the image. And a lot of people, sort of get onto me for spending too much time in one area on one photo rather than taking lots of different compositions. But the reality is that I would rather get one good cracking shot than a bunch of average compositions by running around and not taking my time. So if you're going to spend the time to get up early, I suggest you spend some time getting your composition right, and you'll always be happier in the end. Now, the other thing on this image that I think could be better, let me grab a healing brush tool over here, and let's do this. See these white dots? I mentioned those in the beginning. We can just use a healing brush and get rid of those. And this only star in the sky just looks like a hot pixel. Get rid of it. Straight away, you can see that's sort of done things. Same with any sort of hot pixels down here in the sand under the thing. Anything that's not adding value, just use your healing brush and get rid of it. You can see how simple it is. I mean, I'm just doing this real roughly, and it's making a big difference. You can get rid of anything that's just not adding value. If you think it doesn't add value, take it out of the image, and that way you're going to have a cleaner image. And that's taken me like 20 seconds, and you have a better looking image, right? So that's another thing that I would do. Now, looking at the EXIF data for this image, as I said before, this person has sent me an image that has EXIF data in it, so I'm able to tell you a bit about the image. And Becky B shot this at 24mm. So she had a 24 to 105 millimeter lens. She shot it at 24. I think she could have zoomed in and got a better crop, a better composition. Now she shot it at f3.5. So I feel that's a mistake. Now the reason for that is f.35 gives you a shallow depth of field, and in a landscape photo, you want to try and maximize your depth of field. The other thing is a lot of lenses don't work well in their widest setting with the widest aperture. These lenses that are made to go from 24mm to 105mm, there's a compromise somewhere always in that lens. So I would suggest that if you're going to shoot landscape photography, try and get it between f9 and f13. Typically you'll find that that'll be the sweet spot on most lenses, and it'll give you whole image sharpness throughout without any issues whatsoever. Not that this image is not sharp throughout, it looks pretty good, but there's no reason to shoot at f3.5. The other thing is that unless you wanted the fast shutter speed, and maybe Becky wanted to capture the waves without them blurring, what I would have done that I think would have brought a little bit more drama to this image is actually gone for a longer shutter speed. So by closing the aperture or stopping it down and making it sort of an f9, f10, f11, f13, something like that, you would have got a longer shutter speed, because this is shot at 1/15th of a second. And if you close the aperture down, so a smaller hole, let less light in, you would have had a longer shutter speed, and that would have blurred all these waves, and then you would have got a different effect. And I think I would have been more likely to do that. It was also shot at ISO 800, so that sort of tells me that what Becky was trying to do was capture the waves without them being blurred, although they are slightly blurred, because 1/15th of a second is not super fast. I would have suggested that it would have been a better idea to have gone for a longer shutter speed. So always, if I can recommend this, get your ISO down as low as you can go, because what a result of higher ISO is, let's just zoom in on this, if I can, if you have a look, we get up nice and close, you'll see all this speckling. That's noise, and noise is a result of high ISO. Now this is low resolution, so we're not seeing it great here, but yeah, ISO will affect the amount of noise in your image. So I suggest get your ISO as low as you can go, get your aperture somewhere in the sweet spot, and then shoot at a longer shutter speed to start blurring things, and that'll give you a better a better image. I feel you'll get a better finish. So hopefully that was helpful for you, Becky B. Thanks for sending your image in. Now, if you do want your image critiqued on this show, send it to ben@on3legs.com. That's with the word 3, and you'll see the email in the video description down below. Feel free to send me in an image. If you can, make sure that it still has the EXIF information stored in the image, and that way I can make sure that I give you the best possible feedback that I can give you, because that way I can see how you've shot the image. All right, let's move on to the next one. The next one is Peter from Peter B Photography, and he has shot this wonderful image of St Mary's Cathedral here in Sydney. This is a very famous church in Sydney, Sydney City, and quite popular to photograph. Actually, quite difficult to photograph because there's not a lot of room around the chapel for you to get into. So it makes it difficult for you to be able to get close into the actual into a position where you can actually capture it. So it's quite difficult. And I'll get these warnings coming up, little lights flashing, but that's okay. All right, so this image here, quite difficult to capture. There's not a lot of room around it. Now, Peter shot this with a Nikon D7200 and a nice wide-angle lens, a Tokina 11-16 f2.8. And this is an example of when you lower your ISO and you increase your aperture, how you can get a longer shutter speed. So he shot this at ISO 100 f13, and it's a 10-second exposure. Now, once again, let's have a look at composition, because I think there's a few things going on here that are a little bit distracting in this image. Now, really, the cathedral should be the main thing that we're looking at here, and it should be the main subject in the image. And let's just start by putting the rule of thirds, because I'm a big fan of the rule of thirds. Now, you can see straight away that the cathedral is right on point with the rule of thirds, so that works. Over here, though, on these 2 points, there's not much of interest. There's this big sun star. Now, I actually find this big sun star is really dominating in this image. And it's not a sun star, sorry, it's a light. There we go, it's a light. But, there's another one down here. I find that really distracting. And this would have been an example where I probably would have used HDR, because that sun star is definitely overexposed. Like, if you have a look right here, just so you can see what I'm talking about. Let me get my brush. Well, I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about, but there you go. I'll circle it just in case. Apparently the feed is dropping out again. Wow, we're having a lot of challenges, are we? All right. Yeah, so that sun star there, I find that quite distracting, and I would have done HDR to get rid of that. The other thing is, there's a few compositional things here going on that I don't think work for this image. Number one, the top of the cathedral is right on the edge of the top of the image. The other thing is this tree is very close to it. So a couple of ways you could fix that. Now, obviously, this is a busy road. You can see vehicles have been going up and down here, so you don't want to jump in the middle of that road and get yourself run over. But you could have probably moved back a bit to avoid that tree. The other problem you've got going on here is there's some pretty extreme distortion. So you can see that this is happening. And this is what happens is when you point a lens up, especially a wide angle, you get this effect where everything sort of falls into the middle. If you push a lens down, the opposite happens, right? Everything falls outwards. So you've got to be really careful when you're taking a photo and you get close to a subject that's really tall and you want to put the lens up. There's a couple of ways to fix this. Number one is to use a tilt shift lens, and that's what they've been designed for, is for architecture and macro, being able to take things without the distortion. Now, if you don't have a tilt shift lens, because they're quite rare, people don't typically have them, and to get one wide enough to do this shot would be difficult. The the other trick is then to use post-processing to remove the distortion, and you can of course do that as well. You can remove lens distortion. The problem is when you remove lens distortion is you'll actually lose parts of your image. So this one here, you'll probably lose the top of this church when you remove the distortion. So you've got to keep that in mind when you take the shot, and make sure that you leave room around whatever it is you're going to then remove. And so that's just thinking about your process once you've done the image, how you're going to process the image. So you want to think about that as you're taking your photo. Otherwise, you'll end up with a problem where you get back and you won't have the ability to be able to fix your image in post. And now you might like the distorted look, maybe it's what you're going for, but to me, I don't think it adds any value. The other thing about this is there's an awfully large amount of road here. And so it looks like the camera's set up quite low, and that was probably to overcome this issue of the tree here, because if I had see that Petter would have stood up, that would lower this, and it's all these things that parallax movement happening. So maybe it wasn't the best place to stand to take a photo of this. I don't know. So there's a few things happening here that if I want to summarize quickly that need to be fixed. I think these are overblown. It would be a good cause for HDR. Obviously, being a 10-second exposure, capturing nice cloud movement, I think that's really good. The distortion is troubling me. I don't think that works. Losing the top of the church doesn't work. And then to finalize things, so once again, a lot of compositional errors and a few sort of technical errors. I can see a few areas of dust spots, and this is something that as photographers I want you all to look out for, is these dust spots. And I'll zoom in so you can see them, because I want you to be able to really quickly see what I'm talking about. That one there, that's a dust spot right there. Okay, you can see that one there. Dust spots there, dust spot, dust spot, dust spot. They're everywhere in this image, right? And they're very, very easy to remove, whether it's in Lightroom or it's in Photoshop. You just use this healing brush. You see this one here? We'll just use our healing brush. We just do this and it disappears. Okay, there's one there. You do this and it disappears. So there, get rid of your dust spots. You don't want dust spots in your images. They're very easy to get rid of, so there's no excuse. You may as well just get rid of them. Okay, whether you got Lightroom, Photoshop, doesn't matter. You can get rid of them. The other thing that I've just noticed now that I've zoomed in nice and tight is you can see there's actually a fair bit of chromatic aberration, which is something that's sort of unavoidable with some lenses. The more expensive the lens, the less likely it's going to happen, because they put different elements into the glass to stop it from happening. But on this particular image, there's a bit as well. So just keep that in mind. And in pretty much all programs these days, there's the ability to remove a lot of that, because they give you selections inside of Lightroom or Photoshop, things that's easy to remove chromatic aberration. And I really think that you can do that easily. Alrighty, now we've got the third one to go through. How's the feed going? Everybody okay with the feed? We're getting a good signal now, are we? I'm not getting anyone saying we're dropped out. And let me know your feedback. Are you finding this helpful? You find those tips helpful? But certainly, I think things like dust spots are just easy to remove. Chromatic aberration. Tick the box to say, do the automatic chromatic aberration. Do all those things that your software allows you to do easily, and it'll help you create better photos. All right, we're going to shoot into image number 3, which looks something like this. Image number 3, I don't have EXIF information for, unfortunately. Now this image was sent in by Grant, and it's Loch. I'm going to try and do this. It says Loch Lomond on the top, but in his email he said it's Loch Pommenders in Scotland. I have no EXIF data whatsoever, but there's a few things I'm going to pick up on pretty quickly with this image. Now if I go to 100%, that's what I've got 100%. So what I'm showing you on my screen is the fit to screen inside Photoshop is actually doubling the size of the file. It is a Retina display, so that does help. But you're looking at a relatively low res information. So if it's looking a bit grainy, that's why. But I wanted to tell you a bit about what I thought of this image, and thanks once again, Grant, for sending this. Thanks to Grant Penter and Becky B for sending their images in, because it really is, like I said, a brave thing to do. And I'm getting lots of images, and if you do want your image critiqued on this show, then send them to ben@on3legs.com, and I will do that for you. Alright, so Grant, let's have a look at some of the things that I think could have been done better in this image. Let me start by adding a layer so I can draw on it. I'm going to just add several layers to start with. Okay. So, first things first. Now, I know it's Scotland, right? So, you're probably not going to get the best sunrises and sunsets every day of the week. But I think you've got to be careful when you make an image to think about what is adding value and what is not adding value. And there's a lot of dead space in this image. Now, you might be going for that. It can be quite arty. I think they call it fine art photography when you have a lot of dead space like this. But for me, I don't think it works as well as it could if you did something else. So I'm going to give you a couple of suggestions of what I think you could have done better. I don't think it's an interesting shot, and the reason for that is there's just all of this. Oh, I've got the healing brush still. Let me change to my brush. All of this area here, and all of this area here pretty much have got nothing in them except for water and sky. So if you look at that, I would say it's around about 20% of your image actually has anything in it. Besides water and sky. Now, I like the pano. I like the way you've done that, and I like the way you frame this image with your homemade frame. I think that looks nice. It does look nice. The image is very noisy. Now, I know it's low res, but it's extremely noisy. So I don't know what ISO this was shot at or what, because I don't have the EXIF data. And there also seems to be a blue cast. Now, you may have done that deliberately, and that's okay. Once again, quite arty. But to me, my screen is calibrated, and there's quite a blue cast across this image. So, I think that's something that you need to be careful of. Once again, very easy to fix in things like Lightroom to get rid of blue cast. Just use the temperature slider and move it to the right, and that'll remove blue cast, and it will warm things up. I suggest that you always have your screen calibrated, and if you're wondering what that means, I'll quickly show you what I have, if I can get it out from over here. Alright, I use this little device here, and this is called a Spider 4 by Datacolor, and you stick it on your screen, and it calibrates for you. You do it every month, and then it reads the ambient light in your room and makes sure your screen is always showing you true colors. And so I think a lot of photographers don't do that. A lot of people, I see a lot of photos with color cast, and even when I say to somebody, "You've got a blue color cast," I go, "No, I don't." And that's because they haven't calibrated their screen, and you need to calibrate your screen if you want to really get a true representation of colors. Alright, so let's jump back into the photo. So that was a bit of my feedback. Blue cast. Now, what I would have done differently if I was shooting this image, there's a couple of things. Now, if I was going to keep this image as it was, because I was just hell-bent on having this panoramic and having all this dead space, because it was a fine art image, it was what I wanted to do, or I wanted to, the whole idea was to demonstrate these mountains being covered in cloud, then I probably would be okay with this and just leave it at that. There's a couple of things straight away I can see a distracting point. And this is, once again, I always try and fix these in my shot. Just here in the water, no idea what it is. Let's zoom in and see if we can see what it is. It could be just something floating in the water, but with a quick healing brush, Ben, get on the right level, right layer, there we go. With a quick healing brush, it's gone. And so something like that can be easily gone and will remove that distraction. The other thing, I actually think this last pole, you could do the same thing to it. It's a distraction rather than adding any value. And once again, a lot of people think this is a no-no, going in and manipulating your photos. But I'm a big fan of it. Photoshop lets you do it, so I say go for it. Let's get rid of that one as well. Okay, I like that look a bit more. And I would be even tempted in this photo, and I know I'm probably going to get in trouble for doing this, but I would be tempted to just fill in these gaps with another one. So whether I use that same post, probably doesn't. I wouldn't use that because you can see it's the same post. Maybe I'd use this one here. But you can just go through and use this clone tool, and all of a sudden you can add in some additional posts if you want to. That's how easy it is in Photoshop to do this stuff. Maybe I'll do it here. Let's do it here. Let me try that again. to you, but I'm actually okay with adding some things sometimes just to bring the image to life. That's one thing you could do. Definitely get rid of the little distracting pieces, which I've done. Let's now do a crop, because I think this would have worked better if you had cropped in a bit closer. Something like that. Maybe, let me get back. Maybe not so much that way. Maybe something like, let me just move that around. Alright. So by getting in closer, you're starting to get a little bit more intimate with with what the subject is. And it's really these posts in the water. That's what's interesting. It's nothing else that's interesting in this image besides that. And even to go to even more extreme, let's really crop it in. Use a zoom lens to really get in close. And, we're going to be losing detail. But now you can see, if I now just zoom that in so you can see it, the image is taking on a new life. Now, I've probably cropped that a bit too tight. Let's move that over a bit. Move that up a bit. Let's try that. Yeah, that's nice. See, I'd prefer that than that big wide image capturing everything. And sometimes you've got to look at the detail that's in the shot and make that how you make your decision. Now, the reason I think this would work better, another reason, and it's not real sharp in this image, is there's a bird sitting on this pole here. So if you have a look at the crop, we could probably crop it. I don't know what was to the left. Let's crop it so that bird is our point of interest. Let's bring this in. Let's bring this in. Let's bring this up, and from the bottom, you can see I'm just... There we go. So that bird's right on that cross now. So that sort of puts the bird as the point of interest. So you can do all sorts of different things. And once again, this comes back to the same thing I seem to have picking up with a lot of people's images, is the composition. That's probably a bit tight now because I'm losing the reflections. Now that would be the other thing that you could do. That works well. The other thing you could do is a longer exposure, because I can see this image has been taken with a quick shutter speed because the water hasn't lost its detail. But if you took a longer exposure, the risk is the bird might move and would be blurry, but you get the blurry water. The other thing you could do is you could take one quicker exposure and one longer exposure, and you could then blend the two together to give you the water being silky smooth, but the bird sharp if the bird did move. So there you go. So that's sort of my feedback on that image. So thanks to those three people. So Rebecca, or Becky B, Grant, and Petar, really appreciate you sending in your images, because I know it's a big thing to do, and really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to show the world your images and critique them. And once again, I never ever there's never a right or wrong in photography, so don't take what I'm saying as gospel. And hey, BP Ma, greetings from Inner West Sydney, Ben, my first live show. Hey BP, welcome to the show. Never take my word as gospel, because I've got 25 years experience as a photographer, but I'm just like you. I'm always learning every single day of the week, and this is just as much as a learning curve for me, being able to critique your images. But I think it's important that you go out there and you try different things, but these little things that are just obvious things that you could fix that'll make your images better, simply by cropping in tighter. If we go just quickly back to those images, just in particular, this one here, you look at the difference of that image right there compared to, if I go back to the original image and get rid of that crop mark. Go back there. What's it do that to me for? All right. We go back to that original image. All right. There we go. And we go back there. You can see that doesn't have the same interest as, same with Becky B. Same thing. If we get rid of that crop, we know that I wish I had the history brush. Oh, I've deleted the crop pixel, so I can't go back. That's a trick for young players too, by the way. See up here, there's a button where you can click delete cropped pixels. If you click that, it gets rid of the crop pixels. If you don't, let me show you what happens if you don't, because that's just a good little tip for you before we wind up. If I decide to crop this image here, next time I go in for a crop, you'll see that the crop, I can now undo the crop because it doesn't delete the crop pixels. So sorry, that's ticked. If I untick it, and now I do that, I'll do the crop. Next time I go in with the crop tool, you'll see the rest of the image is still there. So if you are working on an image and you're not settled on the crop, don't tick that box, and you'll be much better off. All right, hello from Scotland. Jonathan McHugh, Jonathan McHugh, I don't know which is your first and last name. BP Mar, what's my quick review on the Canon 6D? Tech nerd question, sorry for hijacking. Have never used the 6D, so I couldn't tell you. You know what my thoughts are on cameras? Just use the one that you've got. Doesn't matter what camera it is because they're all good. Alrighty. Once again, thanks for thanks for sending those images in, guys. Really appreciate that. Now, if you do have just a reminder too that if you are on Facebook or on Instagram, to connect with me there, because and once again, I think all those links are down in the description, along with that special offer on the Well, that's pretty much it this week. Just a reminder that next week we won't have a show because I'm away in Tassie. I'll try and do a Facebook Live from down in Tassie when I'm there. The boss will be with me. I'll get we'll be going somewhere for some photography, so I might be able to do a Facebook Live down there, and do something live where I show you how I'm taking a photo live on location. Although I will be also recording the vlogs whilst I'm there, so I'm not sure whether I'll get time to do a live video or not. But we will be back with Pixel Chatter in 2 weeks' time. So, come back. If you've got any feedback whatsoever, enjoyed the show, make sure you give it a thumbs up, share it, leave your comments down below in the comment section. It's always appreciated. And that's pretty much it for this week. Once again, thanks for tuning in. I hope you learned a lot, as I did, going through those images, and that you're enjoying the videos. And until next time, happy snapping.